Podcasting, the final audio frontier. These are the legends of Brown Squadron.
Our computer is picking up a strange signal. Here, sir, you better take a look at it.
The ongoing mission? To explore the Star Wars universe and other nerd culture topics. To seek new content and new cantinas, bars, and lounges. To boldly annoy Scruffy by making too many bad jokes. Welcome to the Hyperspace Heroes Podcast.
Hello there, and welcome to Hyperspace Heroes. This is Brown Leader signing in, and we hope you enjoy this clip from the ICCC convention down outside Nashville, Tennessee this past May of 2023. This is a wonderful interview that Scruffy and DB were able to partake in the ECPCTV studio. They sat with another podcaster, Mike the Mike Guy, who's a wonderful guy. I encourage you to check out his content. And they were able to sit down on the final day of the convention and interview Mr. Jim Swearingen. And this was a real big treat for the boys. If you don't know who Jim is one of the key people in bringing the original toy line to Kenner back in the 70s. So he is, as the boys like to say, the architect of their childhood. You know, he was responsible for a lot of the toys that they played with. Not so much that I have, but they still have a lot of their collections from that 77 to 85 era. And so this was a real honor for them. So they got to sit in on this interview and ask Jim some questions. And it was just a real big treat for them. So we hope you enjoy this interview.
Good morning, everyone. Mike the Mike Guy here. We are back at ICCCon, and we are joined by the Principal Conceptual Designer for Kenner, Mr. Jim Swearingen. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Good morning.
Good morning. And we are also joined by the Eric and John at the Hyperspace Heroes podcast. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning. Excellent. Thanks. So we wanted to talk to you about toys.
Oh, is that why I'm here?
I think so.
Okay, well, we can talk about toys.
So I figured we'd start out with before Star Wars. What were
Okay.
you working on then?
Oh, gee. Well, my you want a little history?
A little history.
Okay, I got into the toy business when I was still in college. Went to University of Cincinnati, and then we had a co-op program. And my last 3 co-op sections at UC were with a little tiny toy company called Rainbow Crafts, where Play-Doh was invented.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I met Dr. Liu, a fellow that had come over from China to go to school in Rochester, New York. And he was working for a company, I don't know the name of the company. It became Rainbow Crafts. The president of the company, here's the little Play-Doh background. This Chinese guy was their chemist. And he couldn't go home because of the Cultural Revolution in China, so he was working for this little company, and the president of this company said, "Hey, here's my grandkids. Take care of them." And Dr. Liu, this chemist for the company, is like, "Okay." And so he got some flour and salt and water, mixed it together, it's wallpaper paste or now it's Play-Doh. Over the years, they perfected it, became a toy company, Little Rainbow Crafts. So I started working with them. They worked on different play sets, different materials. He came up with a thing called Playstone that hardened, was intended to harden, unlike Play-Doh. And then while I was finishing college, General Mills had bought Rainbow Crafts, Kenner, and a couple of Parker Brothers, and they put together the fun group. So while I was still in school, they rolled Rainbow Crafts into Kenner.
In the Kenner.
And I graduated from college, and I didn't have a job. I had lined up a job with a big ID firm. They did stereo equipment and refrigerators and all kinds of real industrial design stuff. But they didn't want to hire me because my draft number. People don't remember draft numbers, but I was 65 in the draft, and I was 1A because I was just coming out of college. But my boss at Rainbow Crafts said, "I don't care what your number is, come and work for me." So I did, and eventually I never made. I went through my physical and all that stuff, but nothing ever came from my draft board in Cleveland. So I started designing toys.
Well, that's
That's
cool.
how I got there. So, and I worked on Play-Doh and Spirograph and Easy Bake Ovens and all kinds of stuff. So as the time went on, we were working on all kinds of stuff. And then they decided to put together a group called the Preliminary Design Group. And we were looking at concepts and stuff. And eventually, this is where how we headed into, we were looking at TV properties.
Mm-hmm.
And the $6 Million Man came in.
Oh, wow.
So the team got started. We got to see all the episodes early, and we're looking at the film, and the charge was, let's come up with a toy out of the $6 Million Man to go up against G.I. Joe.
Wow.
So we all, everybody went back to their corners and started thinking, how do we translate different things into $6 Million Man?
I'm so glad you brought that up because before Star Wars, the $6 Million Man was my jam. I mean, I was, 2.5 feet tall at that point, but every Sunday night we watched the $6 Million Man, and every Christmas and birthday I got $6 Million Man. I have every verse. I still own them, by the way. They're in great condition. But I'm just honored to talk to you for having made that. What can you tell me about the original $6 Million Man doll? Did you have any components on that?
Yeah, there were about 6 designers, and everyone was throwing out ideas. When it had to be strong, so they had the ratcheted arm and all that. And then one of the feature I focused on was his bionic eye. So I took a G.I. Joe, poor guy, took his head, I carved his eyeball out with an X-Acto knife and cut a big hole in the back of his head and put a door peephole, that you see in your hotel room. I took that and put it in there and sold it that way. We say, this is, look in the back and you see this magnified image, that was his bionic eye. So that was my contribution. And somebody else, the roll-up skin and the bionics under the arm, that was somebody else's. And the way we did it was I took my head with the peephole shoved through it and turned it over to the engineering group, and they had to figure out the optics and all that stuff. So they had to shorten the length from the front and the back to his head. So that was my big deal for. Pretty cool.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, that is really cool.
And it was reprised. It came back in Star Wars.
Really?
It's in the 12-inch Boba Fett.
Oh, yeah, same
Next time you look
concept,
at a
isn't
Boba Fett, he's got a hole in the back of his head. It's the same people from
I'll have to
6
look-
Million.
Oh, nice.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
I have a 12-inch Boba Fett. It's still in the box. I think I'm gonna have to go home and open it.
No, don't take it out of the box. Go look here. Don't take it out of the box. That's like sacrilege now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
There's got to be one out there that's beat up enough that you could go look.
I think there's a couple we could look at.
I'm sure there are thousands of fans watching this right now just cringing. Don't do it.
Or they're going, oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
But go ahead.
It's 1977 that epic movie comes out that we're all here to celebrate, Star Wars. Did you get to see that before it got released?
Oh, yeah. Well, I started with reading the script in February. We think it's February, with some black and white photographs. And then as time passed, I went out and met the people at Lucasfilm to glean stuff that they hadn't given us yet. And May 1st, I got to see the movie for the first time.
Oh,
The only virgin audience to see Star Wars.
wow.
It was amazing.
So you got to read that script. What did you think when you read that?
Well, it had been turned down by a bunch of other toy companies. And I knew THX 1138, Lucas's thesis film. So I was primed for it. And I'd read a little blurb in Starlog magazine in 76, November. They had a little 4-paragraph story about it. So I was kind of like ready. And then when the script came into the office and Dave Okada, my boss, said, who wants to read this? It was like, that's mine. So I got to go home that night and read it. And I came back, every page was a toy. So I was convinced. I wanted to do the dogfights. It's like they're talking about TIE fighters. We didn't know much about what they looked like, but it sounded like fun, chasing around spaceships.
So you created the original 12 figures, is that correct?
Yeah, I worked on the first. What I turned over were 10, and then eventually it ended up being 12. But we just picked the first figures that, it was Luke, Leia, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Han Solo, Darth Vader, C-3PO, and R2-D2. And I think there was Jawa in there, and then we added some. But it was really the heroes are going to be the spaceships, the X-Wing TIE fighter. So we had to get a decent size. So I started out with drawings that were about 3 inches tall, and then just by chance, there's a story about George Bernie Loomis, putting his fingers up and say, make it 3 3/4. Might be true. I wasn't there, but just by chance, when I started mocking them up, Fisher-Price Adventure people were 3 3/4 inches tall too. So they helped me build the rough models that we started with. But it was and all the choices of figures and stuff later on were done in production.
Well, I want to thank you for the original line, and I still have my originals from '78, I guess is when I would have gotten most of them. And my wife does have a standing order that if I keel over, I'm to be buried with my R2-D2. So
Oh dear.
if that doesn't creep you out, I don't know what will. But I also want to thank you because as a child, what my parents did was bribe me to get good grades by buying me action figures at the end of every reporting period. So in a way, you're responsible for my school grades. Scruffy, what do you got?
So, out of all the toys that you designed, what was your favorite? It doesn't have to be Star Wars. What was one of your favorite designs?
Gosh, of all the toys I worked on. Well, I don't know. Star Wars is kind of the center of the world as far as what I worked on. I mean, but the X-Wing fighter is always my favorite. That was the first, reading the script. It's the first ship that they talk about, and that was what I wanted. I tell the story. My X-Wing was a Roy Rogers Stagecoach, but I wanted that X-Wing. Because as a toy designer, I always thought about, okay, I was 27 back then. I think about if I'm a 7-year-old, what do I want to play? When I'm even the $6 Million Man or whatever it was, if I'm a 6 or 7-year-old boy, seeing it through my 7-year-old eyes, how do I want to play? So that X-Wing was just, the TIE fighters are cool, but the X-Wing was like the hero, Luke Skywalker and his, blew up the Death Star. So that's a favorite. And Boba Fett, because I got involved in the Top Secret project. It was like Lucas didn't want anybody to know who he was or what he was and all that stuff. So
I'm glad
Hopefully
you
not
went
the
down
same.
that path of Boba Fett
Yeah.
because we have a couple of questions, and John, I'll let
Oh,
you go
good.
first.
So, as collectors, like him and I both know that there was never really a rocket firing Boba Fett released to the public. Is that true? And
Yes.
can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, while we were in the development, the original Kitbash one was a Japanese. It was a Shogun warrior. I sacrificed his arm for Star Wars, but and we turned it over with that rocket in it. And then as they were developing it, there was a problem with a Mattel vehicle from the Battlestar Galactica line. A couple of kids had aspirated them, where they shot the rocket into their mouth. And they were immediately alerted to it, as were we, because in the toy business, at least at that time, and I'm pretty sure it's the same, the market research, or the quality control people and the safety and the reliability, they were a very tight group. They shared information. And if something like that would happen, like it did, they would immediately send out notice. It didn't have to go through it didn't go through a marketing channel or through the presidents of the companies. It went direct to quality control people so that they'd know. So our people were super strict, hence the inflatable lightsaber.
Had one of those too.
But they were very cautious about stuff, so it was immediately, they know what's going on. They're sitting in all the turnover meetings, so they know what's going on in the company. It's not like an engineer designs something and then it finally gets to production and they test it. They're part of the whole process. And as soon as there was a notice that a kid had died, even more red flags went up. So our people, they have the authority in the corporation at Kenner that if something happened and they could just say stop. So they immediately went to the engineering department. The marketing department said we're stopping this, dead in its tracks. So they were into engineering. They were working on reliability because the rockets, I think the original design, they would misfire. You would bump them and they would fire, and you didn't want something to be accidental. And they were working on the L channel and the J channel and all that stuff. So they were tuning things, and they also wanted to tune them so they actually worked. But that process just stopped. It was supposed to stop dead in its tracks. There were a couple that got painted and probably were being shown in private reviews with sales or buyers. So there's a couple. There was one on card that everybody saw on the whatever it was, the channel on TV. So those got made, but they were never sold. I hear people say, "Oh, I bought one at the store." As far as I'd be incredibly surprised if anyone bought one at a retail store. And I just recently was at a show and somebody brought one to me and to authenticate it, and I'm not an expert. There are people that know far more than me, and I said I can't. It doesn't look good to me, and I hope you didn't spend a lot of money.
Right.
But it looked a lot like somebody had taken the country of origin off the leg, and because it was a little dull, and the cutout for the trigger and stuff didn't seem very good. But I said I'd say no, that it's not authentic.
Well, thank you for clarifying that.
I think, the Kenner kept people really safe. I mean, sometimes you go, oh, come on,
Well, that was me as an 8-year-old. I wanted that rocket, and I still have the little letter, the little apology letter that came with
Good,
the Boba
yeah.
Fett. And, regardless of whether or not it had the rocket firing, it's such an iconic design. I mean, they still replicate it today. People like your version over even the super sculpted new ones that are coming out. How do you feel about, that's living on 40 some odd years later?
I love all of it. I mean, some are better than others. I didn't like the beefed up Star Wars line, but It's all so much fun. And I really, Bobas, I've met many of the Bobas. I never met Jeremy Bullock, but I've met a bunch of them. There's more than one or two. So I've met a bunch of them, and they're all, really great guys, and it's always fun to meet another one, people that wore the suit. Mark Austin and I are pretty good friends. He's the.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we spent a long weekend in a surplus tent in Buda, Texas, at a cosplay group had put together. So we sat in the cold in January in Buda, Texas, at a drive-in movie theater. So he's a pretty cool guy.
That's awesome.
And a great artist. And he's an animator. If you ever meet him, he did a lot of animation Casper was one of his first big ones.
Okay.
But there are scenes in A New Hope where he's the Boba Fett in the special edition. And he also animated when they're coming into town, and there's that creature that veers, that bucks. And Jawas fall off. He animated all that.
Oh, I did not
And
know
the
that.
and the new dewbacks that are in the desert as they're walking around. He animated the sand under their feet and stuff. So
That's
if you
really
ever
cool.
get a chance, learned the whole thing because I watched his presentation on these drive-in movie screens. It was really cool.
Well, maybe Mr. Havens will get him here at ICCC sometime. That would be fun.
I don't know if he's been here.
I don't recall seeing him before here. No.
Sure.
Well, I'll have to talk to
Yeah.
Michael about that. I'm sure we could talk him into it. I'm sure.
So one last question before we wrap
Uh-oh.
up here, because we're running out of time here. Did you happen to design the dolls for Kimmy Cares?
Yes, I did. Well, I didn't design them. I had a designer work on them. A friend of mine was dying of cancer. A friend's sister was dying of cancer. And she got hooked up with me through another friend. Her name was Kim Goebel. And her sister came to me and said, my sister wants to have a legacy. So a friend of mine who's a soft goods engineer from Kenner designed a doll for, it was for moms to deal with telling their kids that she has cancer and she's going to be going through some changes. So we had a book written and illustrated, and then the dolls, and we packaged them and for a while marketed them as Kimmy Cares. And it was kind of cool. It was
that's
so
really
the
neat.
doll had a wig on, and so mom could talk about, I'm going to lose my hair, and it might come back the same, because we found out through Kim Goebel and her many times with chemotherapy, it was frightening for kids to see mom change so much. So it was an honor to, work on her legacy.
Yeah, that's kind of giving me goosebumps. That's really awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, she did get to see the dolls, but she never really got to see all the good work it did.
Absolutely. That is amazing.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really cool, and I was reading up on you. I was like, that's a cool thing.
Yeah, the toy business, people that are in the toy business get to do some really great stuff. And the people here at the convention, all the 501 and all those people, and all the, the charities and stuff, they don't get enough attention and, and recognition for all the work that they do.
Absolutely.
I've heard some incredible stories. My garrison, the Bluegrass, has a great story that way. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. A great talk.
well, thanks.
Yeah.
I always enjoy this. I just did an interview with some guys in Madrid.
Really?
They said, well, you have to get me invited to come over to Madrid. A little closer. I haven't been in Spain for a while, so
Yeah, take a little vacation in Europe there.
maybe.
All right. Well, I think that's going to about do it for us. Thank you all for joining us, and be sure to come out to the con.
Yeah, come on out.
ECPCTV.
Hyperspace Heroes podcast can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Stitcher, and most other podcast services. If we are not on your service of choice, let us know. To leave your 5-star review, just click on the review button on your podcast service of choice and praise us to the maximum character limit available. To contact the show to comment, ask a question, suggest a conversation topic, or just to tell us how handsome we are, you can send us a DM on our Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter accounts. You can also email us at brownsquadron@gmail.com. Star Wars, its characters, shows, movies, books, etc. You get it. Are properties of Lucasfilm and Disney. Hyperspace Heroes podcast has no affiliation with Lucasfilm and Disney, although we would very much like to. Hyperspace Heroes podcast comments and opinions are ours alone, and the show is for entertainment purposes only. This is so we cannot be held liable when we say something dumb. If you're still listening at this point, we would like to say thank you for joining us on this exposition into a galaxy far, far away, and we appreciate you spending your time with us. We hope you'll share the show with other fans, and that you'll tune in again for the next episode.
Hyperspace nucha ni mechawa varma ODS ma pakakajitika heroes. This guy's Chesko Murishani man.
Hyperspace Heroes podcast, the legend of Brown Squadron.
Chona atimiri makachi sastuta yuna shuba ikabunga utora choka. Kavasunuta the East Charlie Chu Ichuba Naga.
That's no moon! Sorry, he burped.